Hey, Sarah and the Metal Theologian. Alright, I don't know what the fuck I'm going to talk about, so just another fucking what's spinning video. But there's a little bit of a saga this time, actually. And, yeah, I won't bury the lead. So, this guy just found its way to my house pretty recently. I think it's funny that there's like this price tag on it. I don't know what currency that could have been. I mean, I don't know what the exchange rate was with lira. But, yeah. 1,000, like Italian lira, like 1,000 something. I don't know what the fuck they would have been selling this for, but because it's not worth that kind of money. But it's a little tough to find, and Chromie D, good friend of the program, he hyped it pretty hard, and when I actually told him I'd sent away for it, he kind of backed off because he was nervous and shit. He was like, oh fuck, I didn't mean to hype it that hard because you're probably going to hit it. I was like, no, dude, it's already on my radar. And I like some corny shit. So first of all, this record's great. And actually, this is funny. I'm like a minute and a half in, and this already isn't the video I was intending to make. Fuck it though, man. I'm rolling with it. So yeah, so I this thing was on my radar, right? I heard it was like a hard rock record that's really good and looks a lot cheesier than it actually is. Based on this and sort of my general impression of it, my impression of it was that it was going to sound a lot like if Angel had made their first record in 82 instead of 77 or 78. And I was pretty close, I think, actually. They don't, you know, have the heavy synth on here. You know, they have Greg Giuffria's synth. And I don't know if there's anything on this that's quite as, like, epic as, like, the Towers, sort of as far as, like, majestic in that kind of sense. It's more sort of straight ahead, like this kind of rock and roll. But it's fucking fantastic, man. I listened to it twice the first day when I got it, you know, and played it kind of a lot. And yeah, it's not as heavy as a lot of the shit I normally tend to gravitate towards, but hey, this is what I was listening to before. Possibly for an upcoming video on 70s double live albums, which I'm thinking about as a topic for a future video. But yeah, like, sort of prepare for this, I was like, well, what kind of cheesy shit should I pull out? Now, see, I'm mostly listening to, like, stoner shit, right? So, like, you know, records like this, which maybe aren't the heaviest thing, but are more sort of, you know, rockin' and sort of, I mean, greasy, you know? And this is definitely more sort of, so I was like, well, what kind of glam shit do I have? So I pulled this one out. Again. And, I mean, this record is really about as good as it looks. Which means that you look at it at first glance, and it's like, oh fuck, it's gonna be some piece of shit glam record, right? But you look at them a little bit closer, and it's like, oh wait a minute, man, these guys, you know, this guy isn't really brimming over with charisma and shit. So maybe it's actually good, and it is actually good, but it's pretty wimpy. You know, like if you this is on Viper, and if you got this record because you thought those Razor records on Viper were so good, you're gonna be pretty fucking disappointed. But like as like cheesy ass poppy, you know, sort of corporate metal goes without a big corporation behind them, Dagger's great. I mean, I don't know if they're really first rate even by that standard, but they're an acceptable second rate. And since I got this record, maybe, I don't know, a year ago, I probably played it 4 or 5 times and really enjoyed it every time. So, you know, given that it sent me back all about $10, it was worth it. But anyway, I told Chromie, I was like, yeah, I pulled this one out to sort of prepare myself, and he was like, oh, no, man, that's not the same shit. I think it kind of is, honestly. So I was like, well, let's try again, then. How about this one, man? That looks nice and cheesy, right? Licks, get your licks in. Fucking 4 songs, same songs on both sides. Now, unlike Dagger, they're not Canadian. Oh, Thinking Against Squadron wasn't Canadian either, so. But, you know, it's a pretty rockin' record, you know, again, I mean, it's, not so much wimpy as sleazy, I would say, but even so, I mean, this is just like a really good hard rock record is what it really is, you know what I mean? So it's 87, actually, it's a little bit late for that, even like the cover, I mean, that's kind of a thick cardboard for 87, but that's what the thing says. And anyway, it's a really cool record, you know, again, it's not my usual, you know, Blair. It's definitely more sort of on the commercial side, but the songs are good and it's nice, man. You know, this is one of those records where I go, oh fuck, you know, I haven't played this so long. pull it out and go, man, this made no impression on me at all. And then I put it on and I go, oh, you know, I actually recognize all these songs because it actually made a really deep impression on me. I just kind of let my fucked up thoughts about it get around it. Just like this song, too. I'm like wanting to sing along with this song. It's only like the third time I've heard it or fourth time or something, but I mean, that's a pretty solid hook there, right? You know, I mean, yeah, this is not, you know, Venom. But not everything has to be Venom. So I posted this guy out, too, to prepare, and this is kind of more, it's funny, I heard this described as Canadian AOR. I don't think it's fair to call this AOR, because when I think AOR, I automatically think shit. So I prefer to call this hard rock, because it's a really good hard rock record from '81. Pretty wimpy, but no wimpier than this that we're listening to right now. And actually, for a wimpy record from '81 in Canada, see that inside there? They took the trouble to print the inside of the jacket black. Like that white shit, that's the inner sleeve. The printing on the inside there, you see that? I don't know why the fuck they bothered. Maybe cardboard was cheaper that month if it was black on one side, but I don't know. Again, not really like, I mean, this isn't really one you're likely to run into in the wild, but it's not very expensive, especially if you're in Canada. And it's a really fun record, you know, 4 songs, rocks all the way through, man. I mean, I really like it. I've had this record for like 20 years, and it's not going anywhere, so. You know what's funny is like, I think there are 2 ways to listen to this kind of shit. There's the nostalgia angle, which I think a lot of other people in the vinyl community enjoy a lot more than I do. I don't look back on the 80s fondly. It's really as simple as that. When I think back on the 80s, I think all sorts of bad shit. So I just rather not, you know, but there's certain things that I love about it. It's just not like, oh boy, this brings me back to the 80s. It's more like, even though this is from the 80s, it's a great record. You know what I mean? But speaking of 80s badness and preparing for that shit, another record I found that I love. Again, it's kind of wimpy, man. You know, I mean, it's got that cover promises a lot more than what this record delivers, you know? In a way, that beard kind of tells you more than anything else, because that's like the 70s hangover, you know, in 82 or whatever. Yeah, beards were kind of over among young people in the US in 82, but these guys have been around from the 70s, and it kind of shows, because this kind of feels like a little bit of a Johnny-come-lately to what was sort of happening, or starting to happen in the 80s, but the irony is, if you look at the arc of the 80s, and how much more shit came after 82 or whatever, was this 82? I just checked, yeah. You could also argue that this record was ahead of its time. I think it'd be a weak argument, but it's an argument you could make. Anyway, really cool, and like, I listened to Rock City and Y&T, and Lakes and Dagger. And then the mailman showed up with the Squadron record, and I was like, bam! Fuck yeah, the Squadron, man. So there we go. So what else do we have to talk about, man? Yeah, it's funny, man. I'm like, I'm sort of between phases again. I've listened to a lot of shit like this, you know, the Sonic Flower. This is a great record. This is so good. Apparently this is like Church of Misery related. It's like a couple of the same guys. I like Church of Misery, but I think this is so much better, man. This is like mostly instrumental, if not entirely, but just heavy, and it has like all like sort of the doomy vibes, but like with the psychedelia, and without that sort of serial killer gimmicky shit that I can kind of do without, you know? So, yeah, it's pretty awesome. It's a great record. God, what's another one? Well, here's another band I've hyped before, but man, Mount Atlas. I got this EP recently, and I'm telling you, man. I do think I prefer the album that I've showed, just self-titled, if I remember correctly. But this thing is just fantastic, man. And again, a connection again is, when it comes to AOR, I've never heard a singer is like fully committed to an AOR tone as this guy. I don't know how you train yourself to sound like an AOR singer, but this guy fucking is really kind of incredible. And it's not really an AOR band. I mean, it's really kind of like a stoner rock band, you know, more sort of on the rockin' side of that, you know. They don't sound like Sleep. They sound more like, I don't know, Fu Manchu maybe. But the thing is, they don't sound anything like Fu Manchu because they have that singer who sounds like such an AOR singer as opposed to like this sort of, you know, 90s style irony singer that Fu Manchu had. Not my favorite type of singing style, but I love Fu Manchu and I'm not shitting on it for a second, so. Just so we're clear there. You know, speaking of shit though that's like 70s-ish, if you go for the stoner rock and you like it with like that sort of 70s vibe, man, Stone Axe is pretty tough to beat. I mean, these guys are fucking straight ahead hard rock. It's like, it's easy to sort of tie into the 70s because as far as the spirit and the aesthetic and the songwriting style, it's all there. But it doesn't sound old and crusty. It sounds fresh, you know? And that's really... I mean, if you listen to this, you'd be like, yeah, that's a really good rock and roll album, you know? But if you listen to it again, like, it's a really good rock and roll album in a style that sort of draws on this well of the 70s without falling into it. And it's really kind of a rare thing to do, man. I mean, most of the bands that kind of, you know, lower the bucket into that well seem to end up, let's say, overcommitting to the whole sort of 70s aesthetic to a point where it kind of becomes a little bit of, you know, parody. That's not necessarily a bad thing. But I really like how Stone Axe walks that line, man. And this live record is really good too, man. It's really fucking good performance. I have the first record too. And yeah, just good shit, man. Actually, since we're talking about that, the different styles, there are two other ones here that I kind of want to highlight a little bit here. I got these right about the same time. These are actually both on Ripple. And there's this band from Moscow who automatically gets points out of the gate just for that, right? But Starified Fat Hits versus this band called Stew. And the record, which is called, fuck, I don't even know, man. People. Kind of forgettable title. Stew isn't the greatest name either. Note that they're Swedish. So what's interesting is these are kind of both like stoner bands. I mean, these guys are really kind of wearing it on their sleeve, right? With that cover, which is a little corny for my taste, but you know, whatever. So they both definitely kind of milk that same sort of vibe, you know what I mean? As far as the, as far as that whole sort of stoner doom thing, you know, I always want to hesitate. I always hesitate to call this shit doom because, like, when I think real doom, I think like down in a way and shit. Like if you're smoking a fatty and like hanging out listening to music, that's not so much doom as much as it is, you know, stoner, you know. But here's the thing: is that even though these two, like philosophically, are doing the exact same things, this thing has a '70s color to it. Again, not you wouldn't confuse this with a '70s band, okay? But they're listening to that and drawing on that and using that as their foundation. Whereas this one has a real 90s vibe to it, which really took me off guard at first. I didn't know what to make of it at first, you know? Like, in the way that this thing draws on, like, Rainbow, this thing seems to draw on, like, the Jesus Lizard or something like that, you know? And I don't know who their influences are. I could be wrong about that. But this one seems to have, as far as the attitude around it and sort of the presentation and some of the moves around it, it just draws more on that. So it has a similar sort of vibe, but it actually sounds, even though this is like current, I think this is a new release, 2021. In a way, this sounds more 90s, quote unquote, to me than a band like Fu Manchu actually recording in the 90s, you know? So it's a weird thing. I mean, I'm not going to go as far as to like try and write this off as like 90s nostalgia or something, just like I wouldn't write off a good current metal band as 80s nostalgia, you know? And an important point, since I don't really like nostalgia, I don't feel like this requires nostalgia to be an enjoyable record, okay? Of these two, this one is more my taste. I like Stew more than I like Starified. But there's lots to like here, and it's not, you know, just some sort of weird, you know, irony thing either. I mean, it's a good record, so, I'm gonna give it a tip of the hat. Yeah, I've been geeking out over this Ripple label kind of a lot lately, and, I mean, shit, I talked about 3 now. Talked about more in the past, and you probably heard me do the same shit with, fuck, this is a Ripple too, what am I saying? You probably see me do the same shit with like heavy psych and that, but you know, I shop by label, so that's kind of what happens, right? So how about if we switch gears again a little bit? I left this one out really just to show it. And I don't have a whole lot to say about it that I haven't said before probably. But the Residents, I mean, amazing band, right? But I think this is probably my favorite Residents record. And I first got into the Residents, I'm pretty sure I was still in high school. So, you know, a good 30 years ago. I've spent a lot of time listening to these records and thinking about which ones I like the most. For a while, like early on, like I really dug the Third Reich and Roll because I thought the whole thing was funny. But it doesn't bear repeated listening as well because you hear all the musical jokes and you're kind of done with it then, you know what I mean? It's like, okay, the punchline, here comes, we're going to end this side with Hey Jude, and you know what I mean? And again, not to shit on that record because I loved it. It's just sort of the phases, you know what I mean? And Meet the Residents was my jam for a while, and Fingerprints was my jam for a while. And there's a special place in my heart for the Commercial album, but I think this one, if I had to pick one, because this just embodies everything about the Residents. It has their weird fucking story, which somehow, even though it's completely ridiculous about like mole men and shit, doesn't like make the record ridiculous, which frankly is a sin I think the Residents tended to commit a lot later on. Like that whole thing, like their American Composers series when they started doing like Stars and Hank Forever and George and James and shit like that. I mean, I've got no problem with the sentiment, but after a while it becomes like, okay, now you're just sort of making covers albums and you're sort of doing it in your own like goofy style, and like how different are you really from Weird Al at this point, you know? I think the Mark of the Mole is weird in that way that's funny without being just like a fucking comedy record where I think they kind of strayed into a little bit much. I mean, I was fortunate enough to see the Residents live once. I've probably told this story 100 times, but it was really a bummer, man, when they were like wearing their costumes and shit. But like their big sort of finale was this big We Are the World ending. And like, I hated that song in the 80s. And honestly, I still hate it. And just because it's the Residents doing it doesn't make it a good song. It's still a shitty song. And it was like, man, really? With your catalog, I mean, it was like the late 90s, right? I was like, with your repertoire, do you really need to be fucking playing this song, you know? It's like they pulled all the shit that's good out of the barrel so that they could scrape the bottom of it, you know? It's like, why, you know? But again, it sounds like I'm shitting on the Residents. The Residents are one of my all-time favorite bands. If you don't have at least 5 Residents records in your collection, you can't be friends with me. And, dude, and this one fucking blew my mind too, actually. This is another one. This is another weird one, man. This is another stoner one. Ostensibly. And, like, oh, look at that. You can see the fucking reflection. Let's fix that. Eric Weinbender, this is for you. No more glare. So, for everyone else who's watching, Eric usually leaves a shrink on his records, so I tore it off just for him. Mine always comes off eventually anyway, and I'll show you why. That'd be a good video topic, actually. Record covers that have gotten fucked up by shrink wrap that stayed on too long. But that's not a fun video. And this is a fun record, man. It's fucking fantastic, dude. This one, it's funny, because this one, like, gets all this hype. And the shit that I was reading about, I mean, they're called Glitter Wizard, okay? And, like, they kind of play this up like more of a mishmash of styles than I think it really is, you know? So if you look at the heavy psych site, they talk about how, oh, is it glam? Is it doom? What is it? What the hell? It's really doomy. It has a little bit of a glam influence, but probably no more than fucking Sabbath did, like on their middle records. And, what it really has is like, I mean, you look at that shit, and you look at these pictures, you know what these fucking guys are brimming over with, man? Sincerity. That's what makes this record. So don't let their fucking bullshit fool you with like all these trappings and like all the hype in that. This is a good rock and roll record, man. A good hard rock and roll record. And, sure, you can hear that shit in there if you want. Like, if you want to, whatever the checklist was, I don't even fucking remember. Whatever it is, says, oh, it's this and this and this and this. You can go through that. You can check those off if you want. But at the end of the day, the whole thing gels into a whole that is unabashedly rock and roll, and I love it for that. So, yeah. Probably need to get a better fucking bag for it, but look at that shit. Fucking sticker pissing me off. Covering up the logo. How am I going to know that this is Glitter Wizard if I can't read it? Okay, so let's see. All right, finally, here's another one that I want to talk about. We're talking about bad glam ones, okay? So if you want to hear a really hapless glam record, I can't believe it's turned into a fucking glam video. If you want to hear a really hapless glam record, which is kind of the best kind, you really can't beat Formula One. I stumped Chromie D with this one. But this isn't like a hard record to get. If you have to pay to ship it from Russia, but it's a $10 record. Now, this isn't great. I mean, the cover's great. I mean, my God, right? But this guy, see that Slayer shirt he's wearing? It's false advertising, man. This record is pretty wimpy. And I love it for that, man. I mean, okay, the songs are good. Okay, it's kind of a prerequisite, right? Not every song is a banger on here, but overall the songs are pretty good, right? But, yeah, I mean, it's even on Melodia, man. So Soviet glam, that just seems like a square circle to me, you know? So yeah, Formula One's a winner. Even if it's a winner because like all the other Soviet glam bands left the field and they were the only guys left standing, they still, so it was a forfeit or whatever, they still won. And they get points. Yeah, okay, I think I'm going to leave it there. Just one last thing. Some of you guys probably heard about this, and hopefully if you're watching this, you got it. But this record finally got reissued. And people talk about Holy Grails a lot, right? But a record that was printed briefly in '92 in Germany and nowhere else, and now goes for $300. You know, that's kind of counts the Holy Grail. Okay, so Real Gone did a run of these. They did 1,500 copies, and they were sold out in less than a day. So I hope you got this. But if you didn't get this, if those guys at Real Gone have any souls, they're going to print up more of these because it clearly wasn't enough for demand. So keep an eye out because they did a nice job. It sounds great. The cover looks great. You know, I mean, this isn't like a mega huge budget production, but they took the trouble to give you like the printed inner sleeve and shit. This version is on this weird looking blue vinyl with like black streaks in it or something like that. If I were the label, I would do like, I don't know, a 5,000 run in black or something like that. So if you got one of the early ones, great, you're a winner, but they're enough for everyone who just wants the fucking record, which is like, well, I mean, let's face it, it's a Voivod record. Everyone wants it, right? I mean, there's no such thing as a person who isn't a Voivod fan, right? So maybe they should print 7 billion copies of it. Anyway, keep an eye out for this. If you didn't get it, you might be able to get it from the Heavy Metal Museum too. Yeah, and that's what I've got for today. So thanks for watching. And I have planned for another cooking video soon, but I gotta make more music videos, I think, because I've kind of been slacking. Take care. Thanks for watching.